And I know unity is hard, y'all. It's hard. It's not getting any easier anytime soon. And the fact that you all are sitting in this room today shows me that you at least care about that unity. You care about the glory of God being on full display. You care about doing the hard, necessary work that the Spirit might prompt you and to reach across racial and gender and even economic lines. You care about those things because you chose a cross-cultural church to worship in this context. But what about that good father that I talked about earlier? Not the one that my students ragged on back in the day, but the one that Jesus is talking to. Has the Son not asked that he be glorified in us? He did. Has the Son not prayed and shed his blood for our oneness? He did. He has asked, and God has answered. If you had your pinky on Ephesians chapter 2, verse 14, this is a good time to use that pinky strength, and we're going to turn there real quick, and we're going to look at it. God has answered that prayer. Listen to how Paul refers to his church, the church that Jesus established. He says, "For Christ himself has brought peace to us. He united Jews and Gentiles into one people when, in his own body on the cross, he broke down the wall of hostility that separates us." He is speaking in past tense language. This has happened. Well, hold on, wait a minute, Paul. Aren't you writing to a bunch of churches that don't seem divided? This has happened. Aren't you still dealing with, people trying to put leaders above leaders? This has happened. Aren't you still dealing with Jews trying to tell Gentiles to be Jews and Gentiles saying, I don't know about that? This has happened. This is past tense language. For Christ himself has brought peace, not bringing. He unified, not is unifying, when in his own body. He only went to the cross one time. He only needs to go one time. He broke down the dividing wall of hostility that separated, past tense, us. But herein lies the problem, right? We do still see disunity, especially within our church. Not specifically this church. I believe that God has done a beautiful work in this church and us being unified. But the global C, church, herein lies the problem. We don't see the unity that Christ has accomplished. But I think if we look closely at Christ's prayer here in verse 11, we can see maybe why. In verse 11, going back to John 17, Jesus asked the Father, keep them in your name, that they may be one. So that oneness is tied into us being kept in him and in his name. It says, keep them in your name. This is Jesus' ask. And if we're going to contribute to the glory of God being on full display, the way in which he intends, then we must be kept in his name. No other name. No other thing. No other identifier, no other title. We must be kept in his name. But the reality is sometimes we want to be kept in other names, right? Sometimes we want to raise the banner a little bit of the other names because they give us some form of comfort that we're looking for. Because we can be unified in those names or in these sections of people or in these tribes. We can be unified in those because we don't have to do the hard work of crossing over those lines. We want to be kept in other names. For example, like generations. Oh, the millennials. I can't stand the millennials. They don't want to work. They just want to go home and they want to sit behind their TVs and do whatever. Oh, I don't know. I can't get down with them. We just don't think the same. They don't think the same. Millennials. You got to cross the line and be one with Gen Zers. It might be hard. Gen Z in the building like, oh, that don't even sound good. They crusty, they old, like they don't think right. They don't even know the dialect and the language. They don't know how to talk to people. Zers, God is calling you to be one with Xers. And the Xers is like, I'm good with that. I'm good. I don't need no more youthfulness. I done hung up the cleats. It's over with. But he's calling us to be one. We might not even think the same, but guess what? We are called to cross over those hard lines. We don't just do it. We don't just separate ourselves in generations. We separate ourselves differently. Sometimes it's gender. Fellas, I love getting together with the fellas and having good fellas talk. But it cannot be as a result of just wanting to run away from the women. God has called us, both of us, men and women alike, to be unified, to be together. And women, the same is true for you. If you're running away from doing relationships with brothers and sisters, well, brothers specifically within the church context, because you're tired of hearing us explain, but you call it mansplain, but you're tired of hearing us explain, we got to do the hard work of crossing over that line, reaching over the aisles. We don't just do this with gender and generations, we also do this in class. I don't want to be on that side of town because those people fill in the blank. Maybe we could do community over here instead of being hospitable and going to your neighbor and reaching across the lines that make it hard. Oh man, rich people think like this. We got to do the hard work. It's not just gender. It's not just class. It's not just generations. We do it over racial lines. It can be very easy sometimes to look around and see that you only have friends that look like you. And this is still true about the predominant church statistic in our day, right now. It is a problem. But God's not just calling us from out of those churches to come to churches like this, but he's calling us to be infused in churches, in capital C church, doing community with other believers to make sure that they see a full gospel picture that unites us. So this isn't just doing the work. Conversing with other believers who find it hard to worship a little differently, with a little bit of rhythm, or have the lights on, or be in the church fashion quite like we are, where there's different types of sounds, different types of music being played. We got to reach over the line. It's important. One that irks me to my core is that dividing line that we try to do between who's holy and who's heathen. Irks me to my core, and I believe that's probably the Lord, not me. Oh, I can't hang out with them because they just heathens. Oh, these people, they just holier than thou. We are called to be one. Reach across the line.